there are tremendous similarities between the October 7 Hamas terror attack in Israel, especially at that Nova Film Festival, and what happened in Pahalgam. The coordination, the cooperation between Hamas terrorists, Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, between these transnational radical Islamist terror outfits, is that a cause for concern, and do you see that parallel, sir?
Well, the most worrying phenomenon is the inspiration that the atrocious attack of the 7th of October has given to terrorists around the world, because this is being broadcasted despite the fact that Gaza is completely destroyed, and despite the fact that the Hamas military machinery is destroyed. The effect, psychological effect, of the fact that these crimes have been not only recorded but also shown live on TV on the 7th of October, this has given a huge wave of inspiration to terrorist organizations around the world. And following the 7th of October, Hamas leaders were invited to different parts of the world, including to Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So beyond any, intelligence that intelligence agencies may have regarding connections between terrorist organizations, what we clearly see here is that there is a pattern of brutality and criminality against civilians, against innocent people. The effect of shock, the effect of violence, the effect of murder, this is what the terrorists are taking from another, and they are encouraging another to commit these crimes in the name of religion.
And this isn't restricted just, to either India in Pahalgam or Pulwama or Pathankot or to Israel. Democracies virtually around the world are in the line of fire of these radical Islamist terrorists. I mean, US had 9/11, Israel had October 7, London had 7/7 and 21/7 bombings. Radical Islamists are on the streets of France, of Germany. What can and should democracies do together to operate together to ensure that these radical Islamist terrorists don't have space to operate? What's your advice, whether it's to India or to other democracies, on the road ahead, and especially countries like democracies like India?
Well, first of all, it's completely up to the Indian government to decide what to do and how to do it. They have the expertise, and I don't see in me, on my fellow countrymen, the ones who have to give advice to the Indian government in that respect. I think that it is important to back the initiative of the Indian government, because sponsors of terrorism have to be held accountable. We are suffering from the same phenomenon. There are countries around the world that are supplying arms to Hamas, they are supplying knowledge, they are supplying different kind of financial assistance, and these terrorists are being also harbored by other countries. So of course, this is something that has to be isolated and punished, and therefore our approach is to support the Indian government while making an effort to stop such sponsoring.
And you've also spoken of the need for international sanctions and restrictions on entities that support radical Islamist terrorists or these extremist elements. Could you give us details of what Israel has done? Has it worked? Financial sanctions, using technology to keep an eye on them, intelligence operations. What is it that India could also do to strengthen India's war on Pakistan's state-sponsored radical Islamist terror, sir?
Well, there are several areas of action and several ways in which we can be effective, provided that we work together, that we have a coalition of countries, of like-minded countries, that will tackle, number one, media companies and satellite companies that are giving platforms to the terrorist organizations and to extreme content. There are hundreds of satellite channels, for example, that are broadcasting all over the world. These channels are taking services from companies who own the satellites. So we can approach together the companies that own the satellites to encourage them or to prohibit them from engaging with such elements. That's one example. Other example, of course, have to do with tightening the ropes around supply chains of materials, of raw materials that can help in the creation or in the production of weapons. Okay, so these are things that not only international institutions but also countries themselves, by working together, can maybe have an effect on. Sanctions can be put on those who are not cooperating with that line.
Sanctions can be put on countries that are not cooperating or entities that are not cooperating in this war on radical Islamist terror. So when Prime Minister Narendra Modi and your Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke, what is the deeper cooperation? What's the strategic cooperation that's either taking place or you see taking place between India and Israel to ensure that radical Islamist terror does not bleed your country or ours, your people and ours?
Well, first of all, we will continue working both on intelligence, on developing capabilities, and also on methodologies. But beyond that, this is linked also with your previous question. I think we can consult together how we can approach in a more efficient way stakeholders in the world in order to tackle both the terrorists and their sponsors.
Okay. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has reiterated India's resolve to bring the perpetrators of terror to justice, not just the perpetrators of terror, but also those who backed them. How difficult has Israel's journey been, based on what happened to your country in October 7? What are lessons that Israel has learned, and what are steps that India must take for swift and decisive international action to ensure that a state sponsor of radical Islamist terror like Pakistan can be held to account?
Well, Gaurav, I think that your Prime Minister and the entire government have the experience they need in order to tackle the problem. We can work together both quietly on the security channels and I think maybe more openly on the diplomatic channels in order to promote cooperation against terrorists at the national level, at the international level, and we are determined to do that.
Okay. But this entire ecosystem in the world, there is this ecosystem that seems to give cover to radical Islamist terror, the use of democratic systems against democracies. What needs to be done to ensure that terrorists don't enjoy, the kind of patronage they seem to do, and global criticism goes beyond just condemning a terror strike. It needs to have concrete action to ensure that terror is not a low-cost option for any country.
Well, first of all, countries have to stop contextualizing terrorism. You cannot contextualize terrorism, okay? Terrorism is forbidden, is out of the question, is out of the rules of the game, and it doesn't matter whether they emanate from a territorial dispute or another kind of dispute. It's completely irrelevant. And the countries must not only condemn the violence, but they have to stop contextualizing terrorism. Okay? This is number one. Number two, those who are condemning, they should actually, put their deeds behind their words and help those who are hit by terrorism, like India and Israel, to delegitimize those organizations, to punish those who sponsor them. So, yes, we've seen many condemnations around the world. The question is, what is the follow-up to the condemnation?
Absolutely.
Both in terms of how they speak about it, but also in terms of how they do what they do in order to prevent these things from happening in the future.
And what can the international community do together? Right now, for example, India is bleeding. We've lost 26 of our people where these radical Islamist terrorists came. And you just heard the eyewitness, the survivor, who said They saw identity cards or words to their effect. They asked their names, found out religion, and then shot people in cold blood, often at point-blank range in front of their children. What does one do to ensure that such elements do not find safe sanctuaries in a state sponsor of terror like Pakistan, and terror does not remain a low-cost option for Pakistan to bleed India?
Well, we've seen how the United States has treated sponsors of terrorism in the past. You have it in the sets of sanctions that have been put not only by the United States but also by Europe on countries like Iran, like Syria, like Lebanon, like Iraq, etc., like Sudan. So there are plenty of examples. Okay, the question is whether they can follow through on that example, on those examples, when it comes to additional countries that sponsor terrorism like Pakistan.
That's a very pertinent point to make, Ambassador, for joining me here.